our talk right now, and we will have two more persons. One Iranian, Ms. Hadis
Hi.
Sharifi,
Hello.
and another person from India, Mrs. Titas. I hope Mrs. Titas is online. Okay. Till the time that we have Ms. Titas online, let me give some introduction to the Iranian audiences in Farsi, in Persian. Then we will change it into English, right?
Terrific.
Okay. من خدمت همه دوستان و عزیزان ایرانی و فارسی زبان ها سلام عرض می کنم. انجمن سواد رسانه‌ای ایران با هدف گسترش سواد رسانه‌ای تمام تلاش خودش رو کرده که از اندیشمندان داخلی و بین المللی استفاده بکنه و بتونیم نظرات این عزیزان رو در راستای توسعه و ارتقاء سواد رسانه‌ای چه در داخل و چه در سطح بین المللی فعالیت‌هایی رو داشته باشیم. امروز با یکی از اساتید به نام و صاحب نظر از امریکا، پروفسور جف شر، ما درخواست کردیم و ایشون با بزرگمنشی و بزرگواری و از اونجایی که عاشق کارشون هستن پذیرفتند و این افتخار رو به من دادن که در این گفتگوی دوستانه و علمی شرکت کنیم. لازم به ذکر است که تمام صحبت‌های ما در باب موضوعات علمی مربوط به سواد رسانه‌ای صورت می‌گیره و ما تقریبا به فاصله یکی دو روز بعد از ضبط این برنامه این مصاحبه و این گفتگوی علمی رو که من دوست دارم به نام گفتگوی علمی باشه به ضبط کنیم و در شبکه‌های اجتماعی از جمله لینکدین، یوتیوب، آپارات و سایت انجمن سواد رسانه‌ای ایران www.imel.ir آپلود خواهد شد. Okay, let us start in English. I would like to thank a lot from Professor Jeff Sher. It is the best kind of you. You accepted our invitation for this Skype call, and I would like to have our guests and our actually colleagues in the IMEL to introduce themselves. Would you please do it, Ms. Hadis?
Yeah, thank you so much. Welcome, happy Wednesday. Hi, and hope you are great. It's really nice to see you. We have the honor to know you, and I like you to know that today means a word to me, and it is the best day of the week. Many thank yous for accepting our invitation. First of all, I wish COVID-19 was a pandemic disease that spread love, peace, and happiness in the world, not death and misery. And then I have to say that I am extremely happy and enthusiastically excited to be a part of this program. This is me. I am 27 years old. My initial title is being a peacemaker. After that, I hold PhD in English literature from Khwarazmi University, UCLA sister university, and I work for Media Studies Department at University of Amsterdam, ASCA. As a researcher, about 2 years, my PhD thesis was ethical analysis of others in Game of Thrones. Based on Emmanuel Levinas's philosophical theories, I aim to show how literature and mass media can promote each other and how they can make peace possible. We have tried to shed lights on the ideas of totalization in cinema and mass media. I mean, totalization means to remove special kinds of people from a society based on their racial, national, and cultural differences, which is known as a kind of violence. Moreover, I teach some general courses at Medical University in Iran as a lecturer, and I have so many lovely students. On the other hand, simultaneously, I am working for Netherlands Ministry of Education. We have a combination of an international team at Wageningen University. Besides, I am a member of Initiative of Change at Netherlands, United Kingdom, Sweden, and Australia. Honestly, it has always been my age-long ambition to work for peace and to make peace and nonviolence possible in the world. I like you to know that my personal desire regarding peace and nonviolence studies originates from my first birthday gifts from my father and my uncle, an English book and a terrestrial globe, and a book written by Wilbur Monroe Leaf called The Story of Ferdinand. My father learned me Immanuel Kant's concept of beauty of love, the love of human beings, and the love of all humanity. I certainly do believe that media studies and media literacy can make children and younger students aware of ethics, human rights, and anti-war movements. In this way, Nelson Mandela asserts that history will judge. This is. In this way, Nelson Mandela asserts that history will judge us by the difference we make in the everyday life of our children. So, regarding the valuable goals of AMEL, such as making the world a calm place to live with no more abuse, living without hatred and animosity in the world of among civilization, empowering the basis of the families with a sacred space to grow up our children, and a unique policy for children to be more effective in their lives. As I explained before, these are the key fields that I like to dedicate my life to work on them. It is certain that the problems of nowadays world is nothing but ethics. While I am thinking about Emmanuel Levinas' ethical theories, I am aware of the uncountable harsh video games and horror movie genre. And I believe that today's children are tomorrow's world. And I would like to thank Dr. Ramine Jahanbeglu as my mentor and guide on the most profound intellectual, emotional, and political journey of my life. I always appreciate his immense knowledge and support. As long as we have him, it matters not that winter is coming. Thank you so much, and I wish nothing but Gandhi's Ahimsa, a world full of truth, love, joy, and peace. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Fortunately, we have another colleague whose name is Titas. Okay, Mrs. Titas, could you please give us a brief story of your education or something? We are not having your voice.
Please unmute yourself.
It was such a trouble figuring out, I had to go to clear cache and everything. Anyway, finally I'm here. Thank you so for joining us. A warm welcome. I'm Titas. I'm from India. So I'm really honored to have associated with this association. And I teach in a college, mass communication and journalism. And that's it. I'm just working towards media literacy with Sir and helping Sir out for this organization.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, I think that there's no need to introduce Professor Jeff Sher to everyone because he is one of the best familiar professors and thinkers and scholars in the media literacy education, especially the critical one. Jeff, if you permit me, I would like to start my question with some definition about the politics. Okay, when we refer to the politics in the media literacy education, we may have different definition regarding to this terminology. Politics is actually the authoritative allocation of values for the society. Or the second one is the essence of politics lies in power. So we can see the power in every part of the media literacy. Of relationship of superordination or dominance and submission of the governors and the governed. And the third definition is from Harold Laswell. The study of politics is the study of influence and influential. Politics is who gets what, when, and how. I believe that, Jeff, you are one of the best person who can best analyze the relationship of politics and media messages. Would you please have your definition?
Sure. So the work that I've been doing, and also along with Douglas Kellner, the two of us have been writing a lot together and collaborating. Our key idea is to help people realize that, number one, media is not neutral. So a lot of people, especially in the United States, think that media is just entertainment, whether it's social media, whether it's videos, music, whatever. They feel like that it's not political, that it's just simply, something for pleasure and for entertainment. And while much of media does provide pleasure and entertainment, it is always political. And that's part of what we need to recognize, which means that, like you were mentioning, power is at play, and messages are never neutral. They're either helping or they're hurting people in different ways. And a lot of times we don't recognize that. So I think a really important part about understanding critical media literacy is recognizing that all messages, whether they're just, a painting, a photograph, a song, it all has a bias, and it's all either about supporting something or challenging something. Within that frame, if we understand that media is always, is never neutral, we also need to recognize that education is always political. It always has been since, the early days of the first people who were taught literacy about how to read and write. So for many years, back thousands of years ago, it was only the high priests or the very powerful people who were allowed to read or to write, and everybody else was kept ignorant or illiterate. And that was a part of power, was a tool of controlling people. And that same power is still today. And I think it's really important that we recognize that education always has been and still is a political instrument for maintaining control and reproducing society.
Okay, Jeff, can we say that there is a difference between the American and the British perspectives regarding to the media literacy, and especially regarding to the interference of politics in the media literacy education? Because when I was talking to some of the scholars in Britain, they were actually they were not believing in the interference of politics in the media literacy. And I think that Ms. Titas is one of the persons who do not believe in politics, the role of politics in the media literacy. Am I right if we say that there is the big difference between these two perspectives, one, the British, and the second, the American?
Well, I would divide it between British and American, because even in the United States, there are many different people with different perspectives. And so in our own country, there are many people who promote a type of media education, media literacy, that they think is not political, that they argue is neutral, is just teaching people skills to be able to let them do whatever they want. And the work that Douglas Kellner and I have been doing has really been trying to carve out the understanding that with a critical media literacy, we're able to be actually more honest and transparent about our own biases and about the role of politics and power in all of education. And so when people claim to be neutral and not political, basically what they're doing is they're supporting a conservative status quo perspective that really is extremely political, but it's not transparent. It pretends to be something it's not. And I think that's more damaging than anything, is when you deny or don't understand your own bias, your own subjectivity. Because as humans, we're all subjective. There's no way around that. But bigger than individual subjectivity is these systems and ideologies that are in play. They're in play everywhere. This is part of how communication works. And we need to recognize what are the power structures. And some of the power structures that are in play in many societies around the world. And I'm sure, I've never been to Iran, but I'm sure it exists in Iran like it does in the US, is issues of patriarchy, male domination, issues of heteronormativity, the issues of white supremacy. I don't know exactly, what the situation is in Iran, but in the United States, these are dominant ideologies that influence and structure our whole society, and they have for, since our country began a little over 200 years ago. And so these are really important things that we confront. And so what we've been seeing lately in the United States with the Black Lives Matters, the protests, there's no doubt about why that happened. It happened because we've been living under structures of oppression in which ideologies of racism and discrimination have been repeated since the foundation, the birth of our country. And still today, we see far more African American people in jail, far more issues of inequality being reproduced oftentimes in the media as if they're normal. And this is a big piece that we try to do with critical media literacy, is challenge what seems normal, because there really is no such thing as normal. Basically, all our ideas are constructions. People choose what to show and how to represent it. And what happens is those dominant representations then kind of become part of the public discourse, like Stuart Hall in Birmingham, is that these are the things that normalize and naturalize our society to the point where we think, well, that's just how it is, without realizing, no, it's not just how it is. This is how a few people have decided it will be, and those people are typically the people with the most power, who have the ability to keep reproducing their perspective.
Mm-hmm. Okay, one of the main parts in media literacy education is training our students critically. So, what is the meaning of the critical concept?
Well, for us, critical thinking, critical theory, critical literacy is about interrogating power, about questioning who has power and who doesn't. And one of the tools that we use with critical media literacy is a framework of conceptual understandings. And I can share in the chat a link to, let me see if that, yeah. This is a website that we have at UCLA that has a lot of tools and articles and videos and resources, most of it all free online, that we use to help teachers engage their students with these type of questions. And you'll see, if you can go to this website, let me see if I can share screen. Let's see. I would like to record this. Let me see. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's a framework that we use, and this framework is on that website, that link I just put in there. You can click on it and download it. These are 6 big theoretical lenses. We call them conceptual understandings, a term that actually David Buckingham coined. And these are the ideas that are trying to get at the notion of criticality by understanding, number 1, social constructivism. Number 2, the way language and semiotics work. Number 3, the way audience and positionality puts us in a certain frame of thinking that tends to lead us to read a message a certain way. 4, looking at the politics of representation. 5, looking at production and institutions, the political economy. And then the 6, questioning issues of social and environmental justice. So we use these theoretical lenses as our guide to look at what we want to teach. And then we use the questions on the right side as the tools, the methodology for how to work with students. And if we're working with very young students, we'll change those questions to make it more appropriate to the students. But basically, the questions are the guide, because this isn't about teaching people what's right and wrong. This is about teaching people how to ask questions, how to use an inquiry process. This has to be a democratic pedagogy where we're empowering students to ask and to question and to use their own critical capacity of thinking. And so we as the educators should be the guide, the facilitator, who's leading them on this journey using the process of questioning. It's a Socratic idea, right? Of guiding them through questions so that they will come to discover and recognize how communication's working, what are the problems, what are the benefits, and how can they understand and really make sense of the world that they're encountering and engaging with through media.
Jeff, would you please make transparent the definition of the critical approach in the media literacy by bringing out some examples, tangible examples for the students?
Sure. So let me see. I could show you some examples that I've done with students. One of the tools that we use for teaching critical media literacy is using production, using media production as the pedagogy for deepening the critical analysis. And so the idea here is that when students are creating media, they're in a much better position to think critically about the elements of the media that are shaping and positioning power. So with my students, I have them take pictures, right? So one example could be using photography, and I'll show you an example that we do. This is a little lesson that I do. Let me see if I can get it to share screen and show this. Okay. Screen. Okay. All right. Can you see this cover of Muscle and Fitness magazine? It's a picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger, the actor, on the cover of a magazine. Can you see that?
Oh, yes.
Okay, good. So what an activity I do with students is I show them this picture and I ask them, tell me, what do you think of the person you see on the cover? How would you describe them? Give me adjectives. And so I ask the students to list all the adjectives they would use. And with this picture, oftentimes they'll say, powerful, scary, big, tough. A lot of the words, very kind of macho, patriarchal words, but there's a reason for that, right? And so we talk about that, we list the words, and then I show them another cover magazine. I show them this one, where we're looking at the same person, but with a very different construction, a different photograph, different colors, different lighting, all the different things, right? And so I ask them now, looking at the same person, what would you use to describe him? And so here they often tell me adjectives like businessman, successful, very different words than they did with the other one. So the point of this activity is to get at these critical ideas. So then we put the covers together and I say, okay, you've told me that both covers are describing, giving you different adjectives to think about that same person. So what I want to know now is why. What did the photographer do different in each picture to make you feel and think differently, to put you in a different position for thinking about that person? And what we do here is then we start to generate all the techniques of photography. My students tell me, well, he's got a different facial expression. They'll say he is wearing different clothing. They'll mention the camera angle. Sometimes they'll talk about the picture on the left in the Muscle Fitness. We're looking up at him from a low camera angle, where the picture on the right from Esquire, we're looking down on him. So just the difference in camera angle. They'll mention the lighting, the harsh, contrasty lighting in the Muscle and Fitness versus the very kind of flat, soft, even lighting in the Esquire. All of these elements of construction of photography are very important because that's what positions us to think and feel differently about the person, right? And so if we just kind of break it down, and this is oftentimes what I get with the students as we do this, and I've done this activity with children as young as kindergarten to my university graduate students as well. And so they'll mention all these different techniques of photography, clothing, wardrobe, the different colors of the background, facial expression, camera angle, body language, makeup, lighting, all of these different ideas. Once we can name them, then we can use them. So the next activity would be for the students to go out and take photographs. And I usually have my students work in teams and photograph each other to make the person look really positive or really negative. And the purpose of doing this is to helping them understand the way that media communicates and the way that they can control these elements of media so that they can be creating with media, but more than anything, so that they can be developing a critical lens to be able to read. And every time they pick up a newspaper, they can now start to say, oh, wait, what camera angle? Oh, look at the lighting. Oh, what about the color? And they can start to understand how the messages are being constructed and are influencing and shaping them. And this can be very powerful politically if you start to look at the way maybe the same news media is presenting pictures of people that newspaper doesn't like versus pictures of people that they do want you to like, and see how these are elements of manipulation that are common every time a person takes a picture or writes an article.
Okay, thank you very much. It was so perfect. When we are talking about the role of politics in the media literacy education, we may face with another terminology of economics. And it will be so interesting when we read the interpretation of John Stuart Mill about the relationship, and Adam Smith, the relationship between economics and politics. From the time of Adam Smith to the period of John Stuart Mill, what we now call economics was in fact generally referred to as political economy. The terminology largely means that the economics was not really separable from politics. On the other hand, we understand that political factors are crucial in determining economic outcomes. The relationship between media development and governance is complex. The relative importance of different types of media like radio, print media, television, internet depends on specific economic and political contexts as both national and subnational levels. My question is that how does the politics affect the economic outcomes, and what does the media political economy mean into your view and perspective?
So the economics is very important. And that's one of the key concepts. Concept number 5 is looking at the institutions and structures of media. And today, most of what we would refer to as media is no longer what we used to think of as media. I mean, in just 20 years ago, we were talking about television and movies. Today, we have to be talking about the internet, about social media, about TikTok, about Instagram, about Skype. I mean, the medium we're using right now. This is the new medium. And more than half of the world's population today is connected to the internet. That's huge. That's never happened before, that half of all human beings on this planet are connected through one type of communication system. So we need to recognize the power of that. And these communication systems are not even governmental. They're transnational corporations. And again, I'll share screen to make a point. Okay. Okay, are you able to see my page?
Again, with the same picture.
This is a picture. You have circles, like 10 circles. Do you see that?
No.
No, it's just your background.
No.
Okay. Let me try again. Let me stop sharing. Are you able to see it now?
No.
Oh, shoot.
No.
Okay, that's all right. I'll explain it. Oh, hey, let me try one more time. How about now? Are you able to see my screen?
It is
Same
the
as
only back.
before.
No. It's not working. Okay, so I'll just explain it. That's okay. So what we had just 15 years ago, in 2006, the largest corporations, the largest companies in the world were ExxonMobil, General Electric, Microsoft, Citibank, Bank of America. They were mostly fossil fuel companies and banks. Today, the most wealthy corporations in the world are Apple Computer, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, which owns Google and YouTube, and Facebook. What we see is a shift in the ownership and the money today to these technology platforms, which claim they're not media companies. And this is very problematic because, number one, they absolutely are media companies. They control the dissemination of information like never before. They're the largest corporations, larger than the economies of most countries in the world. They have more power than governments. Today, I really feel that the ones we should be fearing the most, or maybe not fearing, maybe that's not the right word, the ones that we should be really investigating and holding accountable the most are not so much the countries as they are the corporations. Because these corporations are so powerful, they control countries. And to think that the United States, the president of the United States, is making decisions without first checking with some of these corporations is ridiculous. These corporations have more power than the leaders of all the biggest countries. Maybe not for everything, but for a lot, because it's a very small group of people that control these businesses, and these businesses are transnational. There's some places where they don't have internet. They have Facebook. That's all they know about the internet is Facebook. And so Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, basically has more power in that country, whether it's the Philippines or whatever country we're talking about, than the leadership there. Because to be able to control the information flow in a country, well, that's, you can control anything. That's tremendous power for both good or bad. And so we must be looking at the economics and the way that money and especially communication is organized and controlled. Another issue that's very problematic with these huge corporations is that there's very little oversight. There's no regulation. They are their own worlds. They do what they want. And one of the big things we're seeing these days is the influence of surveillance capitalism that Shoshana Zuboff talks about. These companies are making tremendous amount of profit by capturing our data. Everything we do, they are recording, they're capturing, they're then selling it, sharing it, using it. And this is most of them that are doing it legally. I mean, there are a lot that are not even doing it legally. I mean, we've seen recently the company NSO that created the Pegasus that allows people to hack into cell phones all around the world and capture data from journalists and from anybody. That's terribly problematic. And that's not anything that's going to help democracy. That's promoting fascism. And so we need to be very aware of the political economy because it really does control so much of the tools that we use.
Okay, then, as you said, it is the media cannot exist and live without having a very strong backbone of economy. So does it mean that we are not having any media message or media content without interfering of the power of economy and the power of politics or something?
So it's not it. No, I would say we are able to, because we do have so many different options now. But there's a difference between what we're able to get and what we're able to use versus what most people are using. Because there's some people talk about it as the difference between a push and a pull. We can pull out, we can go if we really want to, and we have access, we can go and find different websites and different information. Almost everything's out there on the internet. And so if we are focused and want to, we can find almost anything. But the problem is that the majority of people aren't doing that. They're doing what's getting pushed. They're taking what's being pushed out at them. And these large corporations are pushing out a lot of garbage, a lot of problems, a lot of disinformation. They're pushing out a lot of ideologies that people don't stop to think about. And it's coming through this channel that's basically considered free, neutral, and entertaining. You know, you go online, it feels like it's free. You use Google, you think you can search, and you think it's free. You don't realize how Google is a huge corporation making tremendous profit every time you use Google. They're doing that by capturing your information as you're searching. They're taking that data, they're selling it. They're doing that through their advertising. Every time you see an ad up, they're making profit off that. The role of the economics in this is shaping the information. However, we still have free will. We still are able to do things differently. And this is what I hope critical media literacy can do. And education is an important tool for liberation and for promoting critical thinking, for promoting and encouraging students to ask questions. Why? What's going on? How? What could be different? How could the world be better? And so I believe that we're not being controlled like in an Orwellian 1984 sense that we have no option. What we're seeing more often is kind of this brave new world of Aldous Huxley, where we're being kind of cajoled and tickled and you know, entertained to not want to think critically, to just kind of accept the easy sensationalism. And that, I think, is a huge problem. And that's the role I think education needs to challenge and to encourage students to think more deeply about.
Then I think that the critical media literacy is restricted in making question, and everything should be questionable when we think critically. Am I right? By those type of question that you said?
Absolutely. Questioning is key.
Okay. Okay, I'm asking my friends and colleagues if you got any question, or you may raise any opinion or idea. Do you like to ask a question from Jeff?
Sir,
or I may go on my own question.
May
Yes.
I, sir? Yes.
Sure,
Hi,
sure,
sir.
sure, sure.
It was, yes, sir. Hi, sir. It was so enlightening. Listen to you. Sir, I have a question in the sense, I mean, isn't this ironical that we are into this media sphere and we are criticizing it? Today, even if I have to look out for a definition of media literacy, all I can go will be going to the Google, right? I mean, but then what is the other way out? I mean, how can I take objectively myself out of it and think critically about it when I'm using this media in my everyday, and I mean, you know, every day and out for little information, even for listening to music, we are using Spotify. So, I mean, how do I objectively take myself out as a conscious user and then start thinking critically?
That's a great question. And it is a real challenge. I think one thing we need to recognize is that the tools are not bad inherently. The tools are tools that can be used for positive or negative things. And a lot, like we've just been talking about, a lot of the ways they're being used is in bad ways, is surveillance, is in, you know, controlling and manipulating people. That's bad. But these tools can also be used for good things. And we have the ability to take and to use these in different ways if we really want to. But this takes work, this takes collaboration, takes critical thinking. And like we talked about, everything's out there. Any book, just about anything you want, you can find on the internet. And unfortunately, what's being pushed at us is, you know, typically the violence, the sensationalism, the lies, the disinformation. But that doesn't mean that's the only thing out there. That just means we have to work harder to get past that smog in the air, the contamination that's being pushed at us. We need to be able to push through those clouds to find the useful information, to find different perspectives, to be able to question what's going on in other parts of the world. What are different ways of doing it? And with children, I mean, I love that Hadis mentioned the book Ferdinand. There's fabulous literature that's out there that can really help us inspire to think critically, to question and to understand that there are different ways of being and interacting. We don't have to be competitive. We don't have to focus on individuals at the expense of the community. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can be doing, that we can be using Zoom, Skype, Google, Facebook, all of these tools, but appropriating them, taking them back and not letting them be the ones who determine our lives.
Okay.
Sir,
may I one more, please?
Sure.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. So then, sir, what is the meaning of critical? I mean, when we talk about critical thinking, you're telling me that, okay, we should leave the bad things out. Now, how will I understand what is bad and what is good? And if I have to understand according to you, then literacy is a factor, right? That I have to be literate enough to understand what is good and bad. Now, in a countries like third world, where literacy is still a challenge, how do we bring in media literacy to them? How do we show them what is right and what is wrong? For example, I'm being very straightforward out here. Pornography. I mean, you go to the remotest village of India, maybe education is not there, but people watching pornography because that is the easiest medium to watch it. That gives you sensationalism. That gives you somewhat pleasure. So I don't care about I don't care about education. For me, pleasure is enough. So why would I not go for it? So in that case, how do I bring in media literacy?
So again, I think it's really important that we don't go out and telling people what's right and what's wrong. That's an arrogance that is not pedagogically sound. I think it's very important that we go out first humbly listening and asking and looking at what the situation is. The goal is to question power, and the goal is to find a way to redistribute power, to stop abuses and violence and the ways that society contributes to harming some at the expense of others, right? And if we go out understanding that our goal is to transform to more a humanistic world, we need to start doing that by listening. And they're wonderful models, whether we look at Gandhi, we look at Mandela. There are people across the globe who for centuries have been examples of this type of pedagogy, philosophy, life, and we need to be listening to them. Many indigenous communities that we often consider primitive or naive know more about sustainable living and what's necessary for our planet to go on existing and to stop the climate disaster that we're in. They know more about that than we could ever learn. And we need to move away from our own arrogance, thinking that we know best, and to really be listening to them. So, for example, the community you mentioned that where maybe they're watching a lot of pornography. If nobody's being hurt by somebody watching pornography, why is that a problem? If people are being hurt from it, it's absolutely a problem. But what we need to do is we need to go into these communities and ask, what are your problems? What are your assets? What are the positive things you have? What's the good? What are the real funds of knowledge, the assets, the powerful wisdom that you have in your community, and how can we work with you and help build that? And what are the problems? And a lot of times those problems are coming from the outside. And a lot of times those problems are coming from the media and the technology that's, based on profit models where Google, Facebook, and these different corporations, all they care about is making profit. And so they're going to exploit and they're going to use whatever they can. Whereas oftentimes in these communities, the elders who for centuries have been the ones passing on the wisdom and the knowledge have not been doing it for profit. They've been doing it because they care about their society, their community, the way. And so there are values there that we need to really work to support, and then there are other values there that aren't. And your question about, how do we know what's good and what's bad is a great question. It's very important, but it's not for us to answer. It's for us to ask and to support the communities for them to be wrestling with those questions.
Exactly,
so that
yes.
they can solve those problems.
Jeff, as you said, and Tita's question was actually remarkable. As you said, as long as we are not having any problematic condition or issue regarding to such media like the pornography or something, as long as they are not problematic, then there is no problem with using these types of media. Am I right?
So we need to be careful with something like pornography, because pornography is also an industry that's based on the exploitation of women.
That's right, yes.
And objectification. There are other problems with it.
But on the other hand, Jeff, we have the ethical point, okay? Ethics. What happens to this field of media literacy education? If because we cannot gather all these two contradiction, together, to have a pornography, media, and also we would like to follow the ethics. All right, is it? Can we gather them in one place or something?
We need to recognize it's always going to be contextual. For one society, ethics will be different than for another society. There's some cultures that believe that a man should marry many women. There's other societies that believe that a man should marry a man. I mean, there are a lot of different ideas of ethics. And I think we need to be very contextual and careful about generalizing ideas that can be standardized and pushed everywhere. I think there are some basic ideas of peace and humanitarianism and respect that are more universal, where we're questioning who's being hurt and who's benefiting. But these are difficult questions, and I don't think education can solve all these problems. But I think education should definitely be involved in trying to work towards empowering people to be solving in these problems, and especially when we think about the issues of the climate and the earth, the natural environment, because that's something that is reaching a point now where humans are at risk of being losing the ability to live on this planet. The planet will continue, but we might not be here with it. If we continue with this global extraction and exploitation of fossil fuels and carbon dioxide, CO2, they're really big issues, and education should be one of the components that's part of this process.
Right. Jeff, we know that in the Western countries, there are some concepts or some privacies like believing in religions or the politics. When I was talking to some of the foreigners and some foreign scholars that, for example, do you believe in some type of religion or something? The only answer to my question was, it is my own privacy. or when I was talking to some British people about the concept of politics, they were responding my question that it is again another kind of privacy for our people. This is my question, that are we allowed to involve these types of privacy? You know that these things and these issues, believing in religions and the politics, as you said, they are not privacies in other countries, in other communities, like in Iran or in Middle East countries. So what are we supposed to do with these privacies? Okay, it is a bit contradictory. We have some privacies in some countries while they are not privacy in others. How can we teach and educate the media literacy to our students while we, actually when we don't know what to do with all these things? Okay. What do you prescribe us?
That's a really tough question. I don't have an answer. I think we need to put respect first, and we need to really listen to the people we're working with. And every situation is going to be different. And it's a tough question. I don't know. Okay. I would love to hear other people's ideas.
My reason is that when we are looking at the Middle East countries, for example, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Yemen, and many more countries in this locality, we see that the main issue which is provoking the war and conflict between the nations in these countries, it is the religious beliefs that makes this type of war or confrontation. Then if I am supposed to teach my students the meaning and the concept of media literacy, how to decode the media messages and content, of course, I have to refer to the political issues, okay? For example, to my students in Iran, whenever I am teaching them how to decode the media literacy and the media, messages and the media content, when I am exposed with some question regarding to the conflict between these countries, ISIS, for example, the terrorist groups, okay, who are doing something on the name of Islam, while it is not actually the Islamic beliefs, because everyone knows that any type of religion in the world, Jewish, Christianity, Islam, would never ever say to the believers to kill the innocent people, right? Actually, I myself don't know how to describe this situation to my students. All right, if I am not supposed to teach them the political, let's say, understanding the political concept to my students, if I do this, then what happens to the other, countries like in Britain? Because I know that those educators in this country, they are not going to teach them the concept of political issues to their students. It means that I would like to say that we are not having a unique outcome out of the media literacy education to our people or to our students. What are we going to do? Okay, what should be done?
These are big questions. For me, I think the place I go to is to thinking about empathy. that one of my goals in life is to promote empathy. And I think the more we can encourage students to think about other people, other perspectives, and to search for justice. You know, justice is something that I think even children very young have a sense of right and wrong. If you take a candy away, you take a toy away from a child, they're going to cry. They know that's not fair. And we get into a problem when people become extreme in their beliefs and refuse to accept other perspectives and refuse to look at evidence and science and history. And I think it's really important that we try to, as much as possible, encourage people to look at different perspectives, to look at history. But more than anything, that we build empathy, and we do it from very young, getting children to realize that the child next to him or her is just as important as themselves, that we need to be taking care of each other and looking at each other as sacred, as valuable, as important, so that we're not able to kill and murder other people when we're older. It starts very young, and the notion of empathy, I think, is really a very key element that teachers, parents, all of us need to be involved in working to build that.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Hadis and Mrs. Tatis, do you have any question or comment on our talk up to now? Or shall I continue my questions?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. I believe that recent attention to mainstream media reveals that relations between religion and media appear to be breaking down. Based on research, the role of religion in public life reported that virtually everyone involved expressed concern about how religion and belief is portrayed by the media. And that's perhaps not surprising because there are a number of failing with how religion is represented in the mainstream media. I think media needs to be held to account, for example, for incorrect stories about particular religion groups. Or another thing is that the unfair treatment of Muslims by certain journalists is another failing of the media. In particular, media attention is to a religion often consists of stories about extremist Muslims, ignoring the high levels of Christianity, extremism that could be also be described as such. So the decision of how to shape a story is driven by underlying cultural norms. Not only does media and religion tell their chosen story, they explain why the events happened. On the other hand, media professionals see themselves as legitimate commentators on what happens and why, especially when events are surprising or disturbing. Journalists and leaders rush to offer explanations and taking a quasi-religious role. So try to shape chaos into order. So we conclude that the differences and areas of conflict between religion and the media appears adversely. They could, however, be improved when each side recognizes the other's equality, defensible claim, or what do you think about the solution, how they can solve the inner problems, and so on. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay. So I can't talk about the media in Iran. I don't know. So I don't know how the media is portraying religion in Iran, but I can talk about in the US. And in the United States, most of the media is commercial. It's media that is owned by corporations, and their number one goal is not to inform. Their number one goal is to make profit because they're a business like any other business. Their second goal is to inform and to do all the other things that they claim to do. But ultimately, they must satisfy the shareholders, the people who have invested money and are expecting a profit. And I think a lot of what happens in the United States in terms of the way religion is portrayed is based on profit motives. And one of the things that we see very often in the United States is negative portrayals about Muslims and Iran and certain countries that are considered, the enemy of the United States. This is not an accident. This is part of the political economy, right? They're fossil fuel companies that are extremely powerful, extremely wealthy, that are dependent on the oil in the Middle East. The tensions and everything, the focus on the Middle East happens largely because of giant corporations with their own economic interests that either have bought off politicians who control different parts of government. I mean, our election system in the United States, millions and millions of dollars are spent on advertising for the election. People get elected to the president to become senators and all of that because of lobbyists and because of corporations that have put money into advertising. So when our senators, our president, these people take power, they owe a tremendous amount of debt to these corporations. And this is a very sad disruption to any form of democracy. And I don't think the media actually has a concerted bias against religion as much as they have political and economic motivations to perpetuate these same problems that generate tremendous profits to the arms industry, to the oil industry, to all these other businesses that unfortunately control a lot of the strings of government in the United States and in many of the Western world, where advertising is a key part of political elections and control over who takes power.
I think this is the common situation we have in all countries, as well as in my country. Okay, they are the same. There is no difference between them. Okay, let me generalize my questions. Okay, Jeff, what do we expect to get in the communities when we teach the media literacy education to our students?
Hopefully, we get more empathetic, critical, kinder, better human beings. So part of the goals of critical media literacy, and one of the reasons that concept number 6 that we put on that chart that I showed you is about social and environmental justice. Because the goal there really is to get students to question what's fair, what's not, who's being hurt, who's benefiting, and how do we redistribute power to make it better for everybody. And so I guess my goal in a successful critical media literacy community is where people really listen to each other, they respect each other, and they work collaboratively together for the benefit of the whole group and not just individuals.
Okay, are there some subjective issues, or do we like to have them in practice, okay, practically in the communities? Because, it is very, very ideal situation to have these outcomes out of the media literacy education to our students.
Right, absolutely. But I think idealism is an essential goal of education. I mean, we need to have an understanding of where we want to go. We need to be able to say we want a better world. We want to create peace and justice. Because if we can't imagine that, we're never going to get there. So I think starting with that as our goal for where we want to go, really important to be able to direct us in terms of our pathway. So then how do we go? Where do we go? And how do we move in that direction? And it is idealistic, and quite honestly, I don't feel I will live to see it. But I sure hope that that's the path that we humans will take. because what we're seeing now with the climate crisis and the planet getting hotter, we're seeing the inequality growing more extreme. The climate refugees, the people who are being hurt the most by the climate crisis are not the wealthy. And
okay, yes.
That needs to be changed.
Why hasn't the media literacy education has not this media literacy education made us to stop the violation of democracy, terrorism, violation of human rights, or even any type of genocide? It seems that the media literacy education does not succeed in growing the world public perception to resist against the man-made calamities in the world, or it doesn't work out.
So I think that's a huge burden to put on education. I don't think education can do that alone. And to say because we have terrible things in the world, education has failed.
Okay, what else can we do rather than education?
We need to be doing everything. We need to be political. We need to be economic. We need to change our lifestyles. We need to be working, building collaborations. Because as individuals, we have very little power. But when we can unite and work together collaboratively, we increase our power tremendously. And so I think one thing that the new tools we have of the internet, of the different type of digital networking is creating new opportunities for building solidarity and building coalitions around the world. And I think we need to do more of that. And I think critical media literacy should be a tool about empowering students to be doing that, to be using these tools.
Okay, does it mean that we do not succeed in media literacy goals since there is not a very unique schedule or curriculum in the media literacy education?
Well, first off, from what I've seen in the United States and in many other countries, there is very little media literacy that's actually being taught. Media literacy is not common, not in the United States, not even in Canada, where they have it as a required part of their schooling curriculum. Media literacy is still very much an ideal, and especially if we talk about critical media literacy that specifically questions power and ideology, there's not much of it happening. And I think one of the reasons, like we were talking about before, is because education is political, and the people who control the policies and control education, they don't want it. They don't want students to be asking critical questions and to be challenging power. So we're working in a world where the goals of critical thinking, critical pedagogy, critical media literacy are a challenge to power, and power doesn't want it. And so what we see is the most common thing, the most accepted type of education globally is the traditional type of education that Paulo Freire talked about as banking education, that basically reproduces obedience and oppression. And what we need to do is work against that. And that's very difficult because all the structures in place don't want anybody to challenge that.
Okay, I think it is 1 hour and 10 minutes that we are talking. If you let me, I can raise 2 more questions and we will put an end to our discussion. Shall I?
Sure.
Okay. What is your assessment of the role of media in creating the clashes among nations and civilizations? And when we see that there is no more international objection and resistance in spite of having people media literate, how do you prescribe that?
So I'm not sure exactly. Could you repeat the question again?
Okay, your assessment of the role of media in creating the clashes among the civilization and nations. Do you believe in this actually question that the media has a very significant role in the clashes of among the civilizations?
So if we're talking about the conflicts amongst countries in the world, I definitely think that media is a tool that's used to continue this. And I don't see it as so much that the media are to blame as much as the media are the tool that's being used to do this. And I think, it was in 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell down, and we were looking at that possibility that maybe there would no longer be a Cold War, and maybe countries really could get along together. And, corporations and the very wealthy around the world were looking at these new possibilities and didn't want to give up the conflict. They didn't want to give up the ability to use fear and war to benefit themselves, to control their own populations, to create excessive profits. And I think this is where critical media literacy needs to be critical. It needs to be political. It needs to be encouraging people to ask the bigger questions of who's benefiting and why, and who's being hurt, because these tools can be used for good or bad. And as long as these tools are going to be used by countries, by fascists, by corporations, by people and organizations that don't care about society, they don't care about peace, they don't care about basic human rights, that's really problematic. I mean, we have to do something, and this is a place where we need to build solidarity. We need to be using these tools to connect with each other across borders, across platforms, and across religions, and across ideologies, because this is going to do us all in. It's going to destroy us all, and it won't happen right away. Right away, what we're seeing is it's happening to the poorest, the weakest. Certain countries, certain people, populations are being hurt the worst, and that's terribly unjust. And so the sooner we can be involved in trying to help empower people to build empathy, to refuse to allow these powers to continue to oppress and exploit and to promote this type of violence and these conflicts. That's the only hope for our species. If humans are going to survive, scientists are saying this is coming up. It's decades away. We're looking at a global crisis, and we've got to do something now.
Okay. And my last question.
Shall I?
Yes.
Shall I add something before your last question? As a peacemaker and cultural analyst, I'm worried about manipulating the population in order to obtain a specific political outcome, which is dangerous. I think we have to speak for a whole religion or civilization. I mean, for humanity, not the West is West and the East is East. My question is that how can media change the clash of civilization into the intercultural dialogue between civilization, not the clash?
That's a great point. I like the way you framed it about the coalitions and the need to really change and think globally.
Yeah.
My work that I've been doing lately has been focusing on indigenous communities, because I think there are many indigenous communities that have worldviews and beliefs and even languages, words and ideas that are far more egalitarian, more cooperative, more sustainable, that haven't been corrupted by colonialism and capitalism. And I think the two key, the worst influences we have on the world today are colonialism and capitalism that still are the dominant structures. And the more we can disrupt that. And so I've been finding that looking at indigenous cultures that haven't been completely co-opted by these influences, that still have, you know, they do things. In Mexico, there's small communities, indigenous pueblos, villages, that still pass all their laws, all the work they do through consensus. They'll stay up all night building consensus because they listen to everybody. It's not just simply majority rules. And there's many indigenous cultures that have words that we don't even have in English and in other languages, words that mean reciprocity, about caring for someone else before yourself. And I think we really need to look to these cultures, the cultures that we've been the worst to, that genocide and destruction has been the policy of dominant world cultures towards indigenous groups, you know, since for hundreds of years now. I look at them as our last hope. I really think that these are the cultures and the communities we need to start listening to and looking to for advice, because I think they still hold on, many of them still hold on to ideas and ways of understanding the world that we're desperate for.
Great. And my, okay, is that all, Ms. Hadis?
Yeah.
Shall I continue?
So,
okay.
Yeah,
My last question, thank you. My last question, which is the result of our today's discussion. Jeff, how do you think if there should be an international or a global organization for the media literacy education, if we want to have a unique and comprehensive result and outcome of the media literacy education to all?
I don't know if we need an actual organization with a name like that, because more than the name and more than you know, one idea or six core key concepts, or we need people to be doing bigger issues, bigger things, of building empathy, of building critical thinking, and we need to be able to do it in a lot of different ways. Every context needs to be different, and every culture, every community needs to have their way of doing it. And some might want to call it critical pedagogy, some might want to call it teaching love, some might want to call it, you know, peace education. I don't think the name matters, and I don't think having just one organization is sufficient. We need a lot of organizations, and we need a lot of different ways of getting at the same idea, which is basically teaching respect, empathy, caring, compassion, those big ideas. And I think critical media literacy can be one of them, and media education should be one of these tools. But I don't think we'll benefit much trying to put it all under one umbrella. I think we need to be far more open to multiple ways of seeing and understanding how we can keep moving in the same direction, knowing that where we want to go is about building a better world, a more humanistic, kind, gentler, peaceful world, and then recognizing it's going to look very different in every place, and we need to be open to that and accepting that other people are going to do it in a different way than I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to agree with everything they're doing, but as long as we're moving in that same direction, you know, I'm going to walk alongside you, and I'm going to support you, I'm going to hold your hand.
But, you know, to some cases it is not applicable, because when in some countries we are teaching and educating our people or students with media literacy how to decode the media content and messages, in other countries we have some organization and individuals who are teaching their students the enmity between the countries and the enmity among the civilization or something. So we believe, everyone in this group, in the IML, we believe that there should be an organization just in order to harmonize and organize all the concepts, actual concepts, as you said, regarding to love, regarding to whatever which is positive. Okay, we should have some centers, some global centers, just in order to organize and orchestrate the concept of these positivity or something.
I definitely agree. We need centers and places to build and collaborate with this. Yeah, I'm there with you. I agree with that. Yes. I guess my apprehension is with a name, with a title, saying that it needs to be called this one thing, because there are going to be other people doing wonderful, powerful work, but they're not going to want to use that title. And maybe they're doing just climate justice work, and they're not looking at media, but that's important, and that we want that too. But I hear what you say, that having also a center that's focused on critical media literacy could be another powerful, important tool in this process.
Okay, if such a thing is going to be happen, are you going to collaborate with us?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I'd love to.
Okay, Jeff, let me appreciate your collaboration with us for today. It was so helpful, and I know that I enjoyed a lot from all the documents and all the articles you and Douglas Kellner have authored and written in this regard. I really appreciate your cooperation with me and with IML and with my colleagues, and that has been so helpful. Thank you very much for today. And I would like to have you, of course, if you give us some more time to have some discussion in future.
I'd be honored to. This was a real honor to be here with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.